I never will forget the sound of my name being spoken with such contempt. What is this insufferable old woman doing here? Get out of here immediately! The words of my daughter-in-law Danielle are still buzzing in my ears. They were not just random screams. They were knives wrapped in expensive perfume. She said it in front of everyone. Her mother and her father and her sister and her husband and my own son Stephen, who lowered his gaze as if the shame belonged to me. I did not respond. I only smiled, with that calm that one learns when one has seen too much already. I stood there at the entrance of my own beach house, with my bag still hanging from my shoulder, and I looked at the scene. My daughter-in-law's family drinking wine and laughing and using my crystal glasses and my tablecloths, the same ones I had kept with such care since my husband died. "Sure, I am leaving already," I said slowly, without losing my smile, and I left. But not forever. That morning had been perfect up until that moment. After an exhausting week of work and doctors and bills, I had decided to give myself a break. Nothing better than the sea to heal the soul, I told myself while packing. I took the bus early with my books and my straw sun hat and a cinnamon roll for the road. The sky was clear, and I naively believed that the weekend would be mine. The beach house was my refuge. My husband and I had bought it more than 30 years ago when he was still alive and dreams were simple. Waking up to the sound of the waves, drinking coffee, looking at the horizon, and letting life pass without haste. Every corner had a memory. The hammock on the porch where he used to read. The old blue lamp in the dining room. The smell of wood and salt. It was more than a house, it was a piece of us. That is why when I opened the door and saw everyone there, I felt something break inside me. The laughter of strangers and the plates of strangers and the voices that did not belong to that place. Everything seemed like an invasion to me. Danielle was the first to see me. She was wearing a white dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She looked at me as if she had seen an unwanted ghost. "What are you doing here, Carmen?" she asked with a tense smile. "I came to rest, honey. Like everyone else, it is my house," I answered. "Your house?" she repeated with mockery. "I thought it belonged to Stephen." My son said nothing. He just shrugged his shoulders. It was then that she shouted, "What is this insufferable old woman doing here? Get out of here immediately!" The air became heavy. The laughter stopped. Her mother pretended not to hear. Her father looked at the sea, and her sister simply poured herself more wine. Stephen looked at me without knowing what to say. I took a deep breath. I put away my keys. I lowered my bag and said with a calm voice, "Do not worry, Danielle. I am leaving already." The calm with which I said it disconcerted them, because it was not resignation. It was the calm of someone who has learned that the hardest blows are not returned with noise, but with strategy. I left the house without looking back. I walked to the seashore. The waves were gentle. The sky had that orange tone that only appears when the afternoon falls. I took off my shoes and let the cold sand caress my feet. While I walked, I thought of my husband. He used to say, "Carmen, people confuse humility with weakness, but the tides also retreat before they crash." And I remembered those words as if he himself were whispering them in my ear. But before continuing, I would like to know if you subscribe to the channel and if you like the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. Now let us continue. I sat on a rock and watched the horizon. The sun began to hide, staining the sea with copper. I closed my eyes and let the wind mess up my hair. I did not cry. I could not. Tears are a luxury that a woman like me no longer allows herself. I thought about how we got to this point. About how my son, the boy who slept in my arms when his father died, had become a man who lowered his head while his wife humiliated me. I remembered when I bought him his first leather shoes, when I helped him pay for college by selling my engagement ring, when I celebrated his wedding with a heart full of hope, believing that at last he would have someone to take care of him as much as I did. What irony! I gave him wings to fly, and he chose to fly right over my silence. I stayed there looking at the sea until night fell. The lights of my house could be seen in the distance. They shone happily as if nothing had happened. And then I knew it. I would not cry. I would not argue. I would not complain. I would only act. I stood up, shook the sand from my skirt, and walked to a small inn nearby. The owner, a dark-skinned woman with a warm smile, offered me a room. "Are you coming alone?" she asked me. "Yes," I answered, "but that does not mean I am alone." That night, I slept deeply. While the sound of the sea hit the windows, I felt a different calm. It was not resignation. It was purpose. Because when a woman like me says I am leaving, it does not mean she gives up. It means the return will be unforgettable. Sometimes, silence is not born of fear. It is born of the tiredness of speaking to those who do not want to listen. That night in the room of the small bed and breakfast, while the sound of the sea gently hit the walls, I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman I saw. Hair with silver threads, wrinkles that time had left as traces of battles won, and eyes, those eyes that still kept a spark of something that not even tears had been able to extinguish. I was Carmen Vance, 60 years old, a widow since 42, mother of a single son, a woman who had given everything, and received little in return. When I married Julian, I was barely 20 years old. He was a hard-working man with skin tanned by the sun and a smile that could calm any storm. Together we built a life by hand. I remember our first nights in a small room with a tin roof where the water seeped in when it rained. We slept hugging, laughing at everything we did not have, dreaming of the day we would buy a house near the sea. And that day came. Years of effort, of selling food, of washing other people's clothes, of saving pennies as if they were diamonds, until finally we could buy that beach house. It was not big, but it was ours. Every brick had the weight of our dreams. Julian used to say, "This house will be our refuge, Carmen. When we are old, we will come here to listen to the sea and tell each other the same stories 1,000 times. He could not keep that promise. A road accident took him one random night, leaving me alone with a 10-year-old boy, and a sadness so deep that it was hard for me to breathe. I remember looking at the sea in those days, begging God to explain why he took away the only man who had loved me unconditionally. But the sea has always remained silent. I had to go on. I worked day and night. I took care of my son with all the love I had left. I promised never to depend on anyone again. And above all, I promised that that house would never stop being mine. Over time, Stephen grew up. He was a noble boy, intelligent but too trusting. I saw him study strive, and my heart filled with pride. When he got his first job, I cried with joy. When he introduced me to Danielle, I smiled, although something inside me tightened. She was beautiful that could not be denied, but her beauty was accompanied by an arrogance that disguised itself as elegance. She had that look of someone who measures people by the weight of their pockets, not by the nobility of their acts. Still, I tried to accept her, because mothers do that. We swallow our suspicions with a smile so as not to lose our children. During the first few years, everything seemed fine, until little by little I began to notice how Stephen changed. His visits became less frequent, his calls shorter, and every time he came, he brought an invisible hurry. Mom Danielle does not feel comfortable when you are at home for so long. She says she needs her space. But it is my house, son. I know, but now it is also ours. I remember that word ours hurt me more than any insult. Not because I did not want to share, but because I understood that they were already erasing me. Since then, I became a guest in my own home. I stayed silent when Danielle made sarcastic comments, smiled when she corrected me in public, and pretended not to hear when she called me old-fashioned or a nuisance. I never answered. I never shouted. I just observed. And while she believed she was weakening me, I was learning. I learned to know her gestures, her looks, her ways of manipulating Stephen. I learned that power is not held by the one who screams, but by the one who knows how to wait. Once my neighbor told me, "Carmen, you have the patience of a saint." And I replied, "It is not patience, it is calculation." Because when a woman like me stays silent, it is not out of cowardice, it is because she is measuring the exact blow. That night at the inn, I took out my old folder of documents. There it was, the deed to the house owner's name, Carmen Vance, solely mine. There was no transfer, no handover, no paper that said otherwise. I remembered that years ago, Stephen asked me to sign something to make it easier to sell if they ever wanted to move. I did not do it. Something inside me stopped me, and today I understood why. I laughed alone, a brief laugh, bitter but liberating. Destiny sometimes protects even those who no longer expect anything. I looked at the clock. It was 11 at night. The beach house must be silent now, with Danielle and her family sleeping in my beds, using my sheets, believing they had it all. They did not know that the real key was in my hands. The wind blew hard, as if the sea wanted to give me its approval. Then I made a decision. The next day, my silence would have a voice. I turned off the light. I lay on the bed and closed my eyes with a new peace. Not out of resignation, but out of anticipation. Because I, Carmen Vance, the woman everyone underestimated, was about to remind them that a tired old woman can also be an unstoppable tide. They say the sea teaches patience because nothing in it moves by force. Every wave arrives in its moment. Every tide has its time. And I learned from the sea. I learned that there is no need to raise your voice when destiny has already started working in your favor. That morning, I woke up before dawn. The air smelled of salt and promise. At the inn, everything was silent except for the murmur of the wind between the curtains. I turned on the lamp, opened the folder I had left on the table, and looked at the documents again. There was my name clear and firm. Carmen Vance, sole owner of the beach house in Cape Harbor. My fingertips trembled for an instant. Not from doubt, but from an old emotion, the kind one feels when recovering what was always theirs. I drank a cup of coffee, took a deep breath, and smiled. Yes, the time was now. After my husband's death, I had kept every paper with the care with which a mother keeps a photo. Julian always told me Carmen documents are the memory of things. Without them, time erases what love builds. And he was right. Those papers were my shield. Years of sacrifice, of effort, of honest work were summarized in those stamps and those signatures. And now they would be my cleanest revenge. I took out a notebook and started writing. Not a letter, but a plan. Every step had to be precise. I could not act moved by anger. I had to do it moved by the truth. Call the lawyer, check the property registry, consult the local police about unauthorized occupation. Wait. The last word was the most important. Wait. Because revenge, when it is elegant, is served slowly. At 8 a.m, I walked to town. The road was covered in mist, but the sun was beginning to break through. I stopped in front of a small wooden office, Hart and Associates law firm. The lawyer, Marcus Hart, had been a friend of my husband. I remembered him well. A serious man with gray hair and a calm voice. When I entered, he looked up and smiled at me. "Mrs. Vance, what a pleasure to see you around here. Is everything okay?" "That depends on what you consider okay, Marcus," I answered, leaving the folder on his desk. "I need to talk about my house." His expression changed. "Is there a problem with the property?" Yes, it is occupied, by people I did not invite. He nodded without surprise. And the deed? In my name, I said firmly. Marcus opened the papers, reviewed them in silence, nodding every so often. Everything is legally in order. No one else is listed as an owner. Perfect. What do you wish to do, Mrs. Vance? Nothing that the law does not allow, I answered, looking him straight in the eyes. But I want the surprise to be educational. Marcus sketched a smile. Just like your husband, he said. Always with dignity, even to settle scores. Julian taught me well, I replied. We agreed on the steps. He would notify the town authorities that anyone other than me in that house should be considered an unauthorized occupant. There would be no scandal. There would be no violence. Only an administrative act, cold, silent, legal, like a tide rising without anyone seeing it coming. Leaving the office, I walked to the pier. The wind blew strong, raising the smell of saltpeter. I sat on a bench and watched the waves. I thought of Danielle, of her sharp voice, of her arrogant laughter. I did not hate her. It made no sense to hate her. Women like her are not born cruel. They become that way when they confuse power with control. What I did feel was pity. Pity for not knowing that the courtesy of a wounded woman can be her most elegant sentence. I took out my phone and dialed the local police number. Good afternoon, I said. This is Carmen Vance speaking. The lady from the house in Cape Harbor, asked the voice on the other side. The very same. I would like to put something on record. Did an incident occur? Not yet, I answered. But it will occur tomorrow. The officer fell silent for a few seconds. Do you wish for us to send a patrol car, ma'am? Just make sure you are close, and be clear on who the owner is. The rest will solve itself. That afternoon, I returned to the inn. The owner saw me enter with a curious smile. You look different today, Mrs. Vance. Yes? Yes. Like someone who already knows the wind is going to change. I laughed softly. Maybe it already started. I went up to my room, opened the window, and let the sea air come in. In the horizon, the sun sank slowly into the water, as if the day surrendered with elegance. And I thought that was exactly what Danielle would do very soon. Surrender even if she tried to hide it. Before sleeping, I wrote in my notebook. Life has a curious way of returning things. Sometimes it is not by shouting, nor by taking revenge with rage. Sometimes it is enough to show them that they underestimated the wrong person. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and smiled. Tomorrow, my silence would speak, and it would do so with the voice of the sea. The phone rang at 7 a.m, just when the sea was beginning to shine with the first sun. I was not surprised. When one has lived enough, one learns to recognize the exact moment when guilt starts calling. I looked at the number on the screen and smiled. It was her Danielle. I answered with a serene voice like someone receiving an expected visit. Good morning, honey. On the other side, there was an uncomfortable silence followed by a falsely sweet voice. Mrs. Vance, what a scare you gave us yesterday. We thought something had happened to you. Oh, really? I said calmly. What a nice detail. I did not notice it the moment you asked me to disappear from my own house. Silence. I could hear her swallowing saliva. It was a misunderstanding. You know how I am. Sometimes I speak without thinking. Yes, I know I answered. And I also know how to listen without forgetting. The tension could be cut with a knife. We wanted to invite you to breakfast, she continued. Stephen is worried. He did not sleep well. Do not worry, honey. I said with a tone so soft it almost hurt. I did not sleep poorly either. The air at the inn is cleaner than that of an invaded house. Another silence, then a changing tone. The inn? Are you in town? Yes, near the pier. I will stay here a few days. I do not want to bother. You are not bothering, ma'am. Please come back. This is also your house, I laughed softly. Thank you, Danielle, but do not worry. Soon the house will be mine alone again. The line went mute. Before she could answer, I ended the call. I went to the balcony of the inn and watched the waves break against the rocks. The sea does not roar when it drags things away. It does so in silence. That was how my revenge was. Without screams, without anger, without a spectacle. Mid-morning, I headed to Marcus Hart's office. He was waiting for me with a new folder and the calm gesture of someone who already knows the outcome. Everything is ready, Mrs. Vance, he told me. The notification was sent to the municipal authority. Today they will pass by to verify the irregular occupation. At what time, I asked. Around noon, he nodded. Perfect. There is no rush. The important thing is that they arrive after lunch is served. That way the surprise will be complete. The lawyer tried to hide a smile. Sometimes your calm scares me, Mrs. Vance. It is not calm, Marcus. It is memory. I signed the papers without hesitating. Every stroke of my pen was a silent affirmation that a woman can be soft in tone, but relentless in purpose. Back at the inn, I ordered a coffee. The owner, a woman with a curious look, said to me, "Today you look lighter, Carmen, because when the soul shakes off the dust of humiliation, even the body breathes differently." I turned on the radio in the dining room, and while the music filled the atmosphere, I remembered something Julian used to tell me. True strength is not shouting louder, but speaking when everyone expects your silence. I smiled. It was time to speak. At 11:30, the phone rang again. This time it was Stephen. His voice trembled a mixture of confusion and anxiety. "Mom, why did you leave like that?" Danielle felt bad. "She wants to apologize to you. Apologies, son, are not asked for over the phone. They are built with acts. Please come back. This is getting out of control." "No, son. What got out of control was the respect, and that, believe me, is not recovered with flowers or pretty words." He fell silent for a few seconds. "What are you going to do, Mom?" "Nothing," I answered. "Just let the truth knock at the door. What does that mean? That in a few minutes you will know what it means to have a mother who learned to wait." And I hung up. The clock marked 12 o'clock when I heard the sirens in the distance. They were not loud, just a distant murmur like a promise. I knew the patrol car was already heading toward the beach house. I did not feel guilt. I felt justice. For years I had stayed silent, accepted crumbs of affection, and endured slights. But there is something that time does not erase dignity. And today, finally, mine was standing up. I spent the rest of the afternoon writing in my notebook. People believe that revenge destroys, but in reality, it reconstructs. It gives you back the air they took from you, the voice they silenced, the gaze they made you lower. Not all acts of justice need witnesses. Sometimes it is enough to know that the universe took note. That night, I slept calmly without anxiety, without rage. I knew that sunrise would bring with it a new order, and that when I set foot in that house again, no one would dare to raise their voice because the sea, when it returns, does not ask for permission. The sun had not yet fully risen when I left the inn. The air smelled of the sea and the dust of justice. Every step I took on the sand brought me closer, not only to my house, but to my history, to the woman I had been, and to the one I was becoming again. In the distance, I saw the blue roof of the house, the same one Julian and I painted one summer afternoon, laughing like children while the wind stole our brush and time seemed eternal. Now that roof looked different. It was not my refuge yet, but neither was it their lair. I walked slowly with my bag hanging from my shoulder and the folder of signed documents under my arm. At the door, 2 police officers were chatting next to a truck. When they saw me, one of them straightened up. "Mrs. Carmen Vance?" he asked. "The very same," I answered. The officer nodded. The procedure was carried out without incident. "The house is empty." "Empty?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. Your son and your daughter-in-law's family were notified and withdrew approximately an hour ago." I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. It was not joy I felt, but an old, dense, inevitable calm, a calm that smells of truth. I entered. The silence received me with open arms. There was no laughter, no shouting, no clinking glasses, only the echo of my steps on the ceramic floor. The dining room was messy. Plates on the table, wrinkled tablecloths, empty glasses. The sofa had shoe marks and foreign perfume, but all that was superficial. The soul of the house, the one that belonged to me, was still there intact. I approached the living room cabinet and caressed the frame with Julian's photo. His smile seemed to look at me with pride. "I did it, old man," I whispered. "No one else is ever going to tell me to disappear from my own home." The wind slipped through the window and moved the curtains as if he were answering me. Shortly after, I heard a car stop outside. I recognized the sound of the engine. It was Stephen's car. He did not take long to enter. He came without Danielle. His face trembled between shame and disbelief. "Mom," he said, looking at me with moist eyes. "What did you do? What I had to do, recover what is mine." "But the police? They took him out in front of everyone. It was humiliating. And do you think what happened to me was not son? Do you think it was not humiliating that your wife yelled at me to disappear while you lowered your head?" Stephen opened his mouth but said nothing. He just lowered his eyes as if the weight of my words bent his shoulders. "Mom, I did not want this to happen. You did not want it, but you allowed it," I said with a serene voice. "And that son hurts more than any insult." He ran his hands over his face. "Danielle is furious. She says she does not plan to return." "Then she finally did something good for the first time," I answered with a half smile. He looked at me confused. "Does it really not hurt you, Mom?" "Of course it hurts, Stephen. But there are pains that one embraces because they come with dignity." I went to the sideboard and took out an envelope. It was the same one Julian had left before dying. I raised my gaze toward my son. "Your father left me this. He asked me to open it only when I felt that our house was no longer a home." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter written with Julian's firm and loving handwriting. "Carmen, if someday the love in our house turns into noise, remember that you are the soul of this place. No one has the right to make you feel like a guest under your own roof. This house belongs to you not just by papers, but by the sacrifice, the sleepless nights, and the tears that cemented it. If someone forgets that, remind them with dignity, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of the sea." Stephen read in silence with his lips pressed tight. When he finished, tears were already running down his cheeks. Dad knew, he whispered. "Yes, and that is why he left me the last word." I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. This house was built with love, Stephen, not with arrogance. "I know, Mom." "Then understand it well. Respect is not demanded by shouting. It is kept standing even when everyone wants to see you fall." He nodded, unable to speak. We went out to the porch together. The sea was calm, and the breeze moved the leaves of the old lemon tree. Stephen took a deep breath and said, "I do not know if Danielle and I will be able to talk again after this. That depends on whether she learns what you are learning today." "And what am I learning?" "That a mother can forgive everything except oblivion." He looked at me in silence, and for the first time in many years, I saw the boy I had raised. Not the confused man, nor the manipulable husband, but the son who still remembered who his mother was. When he left the house, remained silent again. But it was not the silence of abandonment, but of rebirth. I opened all the windows, swept up the remains of the strange dinner, changed the tablecloths, turned on the radio. An old song, Julian's favorite, started playing. While the sea air filled the living room, I knew I had achieved it. Not only had I recovered a house, I had recovered my voice, my story, my place. And if someday Danielle returned, I would no longer need to yell at her. It would be enough to look her in the eyes and tell her, "I warned you I was leaving, but I never told you I would not return." Night fell over the house like a silent blessing. The waves broke softly against the shore, and the air smelled of damp wood. It has passed, it has returned. I sat on the sofa with the lamp on and held the envelope I had read that morning together with Stephen. I knew there was something else inside. Julian never left things halfway. I took a small knife and carefully cut the double bottom of the envelope. From it fell a second paper folded many times yellowish with the ink a little run by the years. I opened it with trembling hands. I recognized his handwriting immediately, firm, elegant, with that mixture of affection and authority he always had. "Carmen, if you are reading this, it is because life has put you to the test again. If you are alone, I want you to remember the following. You were not made to ask for permission in your own home. This house is yours, and I do not say it only out of love, but by right. Here I leave my will. Everything we possess, savings, land, house, and assets, will pass to your full name without any condition. The only thing I ask is that you never allow respect toward you to become a bargaining chip." Tears blurred my vision. Julian was always a man of his word, and now, from the distance of time, he returned to protect me as he did all his life. "If someday our son forgets who gave him a roof, do not curse him. Teach him as only you know how to do. Without screams, without resentment, but with the strength of example. Because the respect that is not taught with love, life teaches with loss." I folded the paper carefully and brought it close to my chest. I felt that Julian was there by my side, looking at me with that serene smile that always appeared when something was resolved, just as he had foreseen. I went out to the patio and looked at the sea. The moon reflected on the water like a lamp suspended in the sky. The wind moved the curtains of the porch, and for a moment I felt he was there, sitting waiting for me as before. "I made it, old man," I whispered. "Your house is safe. Our story, too." The air became warmer, as if the universe responded with a sigh. The next morning, I went to see the lawyer, Marcus Hart. I carried the will in my hand. When he saw it, his expression changed. "Where did you find this, Mrs. Vance?" Julian left it hidden in the envelope. He knew I would discover it when the moment arrived. The lawyer nodded slowly. "Your husband was a wise man. With this document, there is no doubt whatsoever. The property belongs totally to you. No one can dispute that. I was not looking for a dispute, Marcus. Only respect. And you got it," he said, smiling with pride, "in a way that few achieve without getting their hands dirty." I nodded. He always said that true justice makes no noise. When I returned home, the sea was calm. The silence no longer hurt. Now it accompanied me. I made myself a coffee, opened the windows, and let the aroma of salt and wind fill the dining room. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. It was Stephen. He had a tired face, swollen eyes, and in his hands a bouquet of white flowers. "Mom," he said with a hoarse voice, "I wanted to see you. Come in, son. This is still your house." He sat in front of me. "I was thinking all night," he said. "I do not know how I could allow Danielle to treat you like that, because sometimes love makes us blind, Stephen. And you? Do you forgive me?" I looked him in the eyes. "Always. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means remembering without pain." I took out the second paper and handed it to him. "Read it. It is your father's voice." I watched him while he read. As he advanced, his expression crumbled. When he finished, he looked up with contained tears. "Did Dad know this would happen?" "Yes," I answered. "And he left me the responsibility to remind you." Stephen ran a hand over his face, trying to control the crying. "I do not deserve this house." "No, son," I said with sweetness. "You do not deserve it yet, but you can earn it again." "How?" he asked, looking at me. "Not with money, nor with gifts. With time, with presence, with respect. I will do it, Mom. I promise you." I took his hand and squeezed it with affection. That is the only promise I am interested in hearing. That afternoon, when he left, I opened the letter again and wrote on the back, "Julian, our son has returned." Not perfect, but repentant. The house is standing. So am I. Your voice keeps guiding me, and now I understand what you meant to say, that love without respect is only a roof without foundations. I kept the paper in the drawer next to my rings and a photo of us on the beach. The sun was setting, and the rays illuminated the living room with a golden glow. I closed my eyes and smiled. For the first time in a long time, I felt that everything fit. The past, the present, the pain, the dignity, everything was in its place. And then I thought the sea never returns what it takes away, but when it does, it is because it considers it worthy of returning. 3 weeks passed since that morning, when Stephen came to look for me with tears in his eyes and a bouquet of flowers in his hands. Since then, the silence between us transformed into something different. It was no longer a painful distance, but a necessary pause. He came to see me every day, not out of obligation, but out of affection. He helped me paint the railings, fix the windows, and many times he stayed on the porch, looking at the sea without saying a word, as if trying to understand at what moment in his life he stopped listening to me. I did not demand anything from him. I did not ask him about Danielle, nor mention her name. I learned that there are wounds that are not opened with reproaches, but are healed with presence. Sometimes when the sun went down, I saw him observing the empty hammock where his father used to sit, and in those moments I understood that the true punishment of a son is not in guilt, but in the echo of the words he did not say in time. One afternoon, while I was watering the garden plants, I heard a car engine stop in front of the house. I was not expecting visitors. The air changed. I knew it before seeing her. That perfume, that hurried way of closing the car door, that impatient clicking of heels on the gravel, it was her Danielle. She walked toward the entrance with a light dress and sunglasses that hid half her face. She carried a bag hanging from her arm and a gesture that oscillated between pride and desperation. I stayed still, holding the watering can, watching her approach. Inside, I felt a calm so firm that it surprised me. There was no longer resentment nor rage, only an emotional distance that looked a lot like freedom. "Mrs. Vance," she said as soon as she saw me taking off her glasses. "Danielle," I answered without moving. "What a surprise," I know I am not welcome, but I needed to come. That is true. You are not welcome, I replied with serenity, but you are already here. So speak. She stood motionless for an instant, lowering her gaze, breathing deeply, as if looking for words she could not find. I made a mistake, she finally said. Many. I was wrong about you, about Stephen, about everyone. I did not know how to measure my words that day. I was not well. You were not well, I repeated slowly, almost with irony. That is what people usually say when the damage is already done. But tell me, honey, what brings you here really? Remorse? Or fear? Her lips trembled. She did not answer right away. She walked a few steps toward the porch and stopped in front of the open door, looking at the interior of the house. Her voice broke as soon as she spoke. I came to ask for your forgiveness. That phrase, which in another time would have moved me today, sounded distant, almost hollow. I observed her carefully. She had changed. She no longer had that arrogant shine in her eyes, nor that way of standing as if the world belonged to her. There was something different. Tiredness. Maybe defeat. But also, perhaps humanity. I left the watering can aside and invited her to come in. Come in, Danielle. If you are going to ask for forgiveness, let it be under a roof, not under the sun. She entered slowly, looking at everything around her as if she were stepping into a museum. The house was spotless. There was a smell of fresh bread and coffee. The curtains moved with the sea wind, and the sound of the waves arrived like a constant breath. She sat at the dining table, right in the place where she used to sit when she still feigned courtesy. I sat in front of her. Stephen told me everything she said, lowering her head. About your husband's letter, about the will, the deed, everything. I did not know the house was only in your name. You did not need to know, I answered. Respect is not earned with documents. It is earned with attitude. Danielle nodded slowly with eyes full of tears. Forgive me, Carmen. I really am sorry. I have spent weeks without sleeping. Stephen left home. He says he needs time, that he does not want to see me. I love him, and I do not know how to fix it. I thought that if I came, if I spoke with you, maybe I could start over. I listened to her without interrupting. And why do you think I should help you recover what you yourself destroyed? I asked. She sobbed. Because you know what it is to love Mrs. Vance, and because I did not know how to do it. That answer made me look at the floor, not out of compassion, but out of reflection. She was right. I knew what it was to love. I loved my husband with surrender. I loved my son with devotion. And I loved this house with my soul. But I also knew what it meant to be poorly loved, and that was something Danielle had never understood until now. Loving is not possessing, Danielle. It is caring. It is respecting the space, the history, the roots of the other. What you did was not love. It was control disguised as affection. My voice sounded harder than I expected, but I did not soften it. I did not yell at you that day because I knew life would do it for me. And you see, it delivered. She covered her face with her hands and broke down crying, not with the crying of wounded pride, but with that of someone who finally sees themselves in the mirror without adornments. I do not want you to hate me, she murmured. I do not hate you, I answered. Hate would be giving you a place in my heart, and you no longer have it. We stayed in silence for a long while. The wind moved the curtains and a seagull squawked in the distance. Danielle took a deep breath and said, I did not come only to apologize. I came to ask you a favor. A favor. I repeated, arching an eyebrow. How curious. I need to see Stephen. He does not answer my calls. I know he comes here. I only want to talk to him once. I do not want to interrupt his process. I just want to look at him. Her eyes begged me for something words could not. I thought of my son, of his face when we read Julian's letter together, of the change he was achieving, of the serenity he was recovering little by little. I did not want anything or anyone to interrupt that process. But I also thought that forgiveness, when given with intelligence, does not weaken. It teaches. He will come this afternoon, I finally told her, but do not expect it to be like before. I do not want that, she said with a broken voice. I just want to tell him the truth. It was almost 6 when Stephen arrived. He entered without knowing Danielle was waiting for him. Seeing her, he stopped dead. What are you doing here? He asked with a mixture of surprise and annoyance. I came to apologize to you, she responded, standing up. It was not necessary, he said with hardness. I already understood that there are things that not even apologies fix. I moved away in silence, staying near the large window. I did not want to interfere. Sometimes love between two people needs to break in front of witnesses to be able to be reborn or die completely. Danielle took a step toward him. I did not come to justify myself. I came to tell you that I lost everything, that I was left alone. You did not do that for me, you did it for yourself, Stephen answered. But I appreciate the attempt. She took a deep breath. I was unjust with your mother, Stephen, and with you too. I could not stand that she existed in your life as something sacred, because I did not know what it was to care without dominating. I believed love was measured in control, not in respect. I was wrong. Too late, he said. Maybe, but I had to say it. I observed them from the corner. Danielle was broken. Stephen, on the other hand, looked complete. Life, I thought, always balances the accounts. Stephen, I intervened gently. Forgiveness is not a door that opens or closes. Sometimes it is just a window through which new air enters. You do not have to love the one who hurt you again, but you can stop carrying the weight of the grudge. He nodded slowly without taking his eyes off her. I forgive you, Danielle, he finally said. But that does not mean we will go back to being the same. I do not want us to be, she responded. I just wanted to hear that. They hugged briefly, not with passion, but with a mature, resigned sadness. When she left, the silence returned, and the sound of the sea filled everything. That night, Stephen stayed with me on the terrace. He looked at the stars, and his voice sounded calmer than ever. Mom, I think I now understand what you always wanted to teach me. And what was that, son? That you have to know when to stay, but also when to leave. I smiled at him. Exactly. Danielle left differently. Life changes everyone, Stephen. Sometimes regret is the only school that works. We remained quiet. The sea seemed to speak for us. Then I looked at him and said gently, Your father would be proud of you. Are you too, Mom? Yes, son, because you learned the most important lesson. Love is not measured in words, but in how one takes care of what one loves. He hugged me. His hug was warm, sincere, clean of guilt, and I finally could rest my heart. That night before sleeping, I opened my diary and wrote, Regret does not erase the past, but it can give it meaning. Danielle learned that you do not shout in a house that has not been built with your own hands. Stephen learned that respect is not inherited, it is demonstrated. And I learned that forgiveness is not given out of compassion, but out of self-love. I turned off the light, lay back on the bed, and listened to the constant rumor of the waves. The house breathed with me. It no longer hurt, it no longer weighed, there was only peace. And in that peace, I understood that the sea sooner or later returns what one is capable of letting go without hate. The sunrise had that golden color that only appears after a storm. The air was fresh, and the breeze carried the smell of salt and freshly brewed coffee. I woke up early, not because I had something urgent to do, but because the body, when it finds peace, no longer needs so much rest. The house was in silence, a different silence than before, warmer, more human. I walked barefoot down the hallway, touching with the tips of my fingers the walls that once were witnesses of my loneliness. Now every corner seemed to breathe with me. I opened the windows, and the sound of the sea entered like a blessing. The wind moved the white curtains, and for an instant I seemed to hear Julian's laughter, that deep laughter that filled spaces without effort. I closed my eyes and felt he was there in every breeze, in every ray of sun that touched the wooden floor. Almost a month had passed since Danielle's last visit. I heard nothing more from her, nor did I need to. Stephen told me she had decided to move to another city to start over. I wished her the best sincerely. I held no grudge. I learned that forgiveness is not oblivion, it is stopping being a prisoner of the damage. Danielle had paid her price, and the silence she left was part of the balance life demands. Sometimes for something to breathe, you have to allow the rest to fade out. Stephen, on the other hand, returned to me like the sea returns to the shore, not all at once, but calmly. He came every weekend. Sometimes he brought flowers, other times food made by him, but what he brought most was time. Time to accompany me, to share silences, to rebuild the bonds his absence had weakened. We no longer spoke of the past because we knew there was nothing to explain. It was enough to look at each other and know that despite everything, we were still there, mother and son, rebuilding what life had tried to break. One Sunday afternoon, while we were preparing a stew, he said to me, "Mom, do you know what the therapist told me? That there are houses that breathe only when someone learns to open the windows." I smiled, stirring the pot. "Then that is why this house started breathing again," I answered, "because no one fills it with noise anymore." He looked at me in silence and hugged me from behind like when he was a child. "I swear to you, Mom, that I will never again let anyone make you feel out of place." I caressed his hands. "Do not swear it, son, demonstrate it by living. Promises, when made out loud, are carried away by the wind, but acts leave roots." That night we ate on the porch. The sky was clear and the stars seemed to hang over the sea. I lit a small candle on the table. "For your father," I said. Stephen nodded. "And for you, Mom, for not giving up." I did not give up, I answered, looking at the sea. I only learned that there are battles won by withdrawing in time. We stayed quiet, watching the waves. Every now and then, a gentle breeze brought the smell of jasmine, the same one Julian planted in front of the gate. It was as if the whole place had regained its soul. A week later, the lawyer Marcus Hart came to visit me. He carried a folder under his arm, and his discreet smile, as always, Mrs. Vance, he said upon entering, "I have good news. The property registry has already been updated. Everything is in order. The house is listed in your name without observations and with family patrimony protection. No one will ever be able to touch it." "Thank you, Marcus," I replied, serving him coffee. Julian would be happy. He was wiser than I imagined, he said. "You too. Not everyone knows how to claim what is theirs without destroying what they love in the process." We sat on the terrace watching the sea. "And your son asked the lawyer?" "He is learning to be a man again," I answered. "And that is enough for me." Marcus smiled and stood up. "Then my work here is finished. But yours, Mrs. Vance, is just beginning." "Mine?" I asked, puzzled. "Yes. You have a story to tell, and there are many women who need to hear it. That night, his words did not let me sleep. I thought of all the women I met in my life, those who stayed silent out of fear, those who gave up what was theirs for love, those who confused patience with resignation. I thought of how many of them would have wanted a voice to tell them they were not alone. I got up, went to the desk, and opened my notebook. I started writing not about revenge nor betrayal, but about dignity. I wrote what I learned from Julian, from Stephen, from pain, from forgiveness. I wrote about what it means to be the owner of oneself again. The words flowed like the sea finally finding its channel, and I understood that I was not writing for me, but for all of them. Do not allow them to take you out of the house you built. And I do not speak only of walls, but of yourself, because there are women who are houses. They sustain, protect, give shelter, but when they are hurt, they also know how to close themselves to heal. I closed the notebook with tears in my eyes. They were not of sadness, they were of gratitude. The following days were soft, as if time also needed to rest. The sea dawned calm, the seagulls flew low, and the garden flowers grew firmer than ever. Sometimes neighbors came to visit me. Other days, women from the town stopped by to say hello. They had heard my story, or part of it, and many looked at me with respect. Some stayed to drink tea. They told me their problems, their children, their fears. And without realizing it, my house became what Julian dreamed of, a refuge. One afternoon, one of them, a young woman named Lucy, a single mother, said to me, "Mrs. Vance, when I am old, I want to have your calm." I smiled. Calm does not arrive with the years, child. It arrives when one stops needing others to understand you, to be able to be at peace. Time followed its course. The wounds healed. Stephen got a new job, and little by little his smile recovered its light. He visited me with his son, my grandson, a 5-year-old boy, who looked so much like him when he was a child that sometimes it hurt me to look at him. One afternoon, the boy ran toward me with a drawing in his hand. "Grandma, look," he told me. "I drew your house." It was a clumsy but beautiful drawing. The sea, the sun, the flowers, and a woman with white hair at the door. "And who is that?" I asked. "You," he said, laughing. "But I made you big because you are the owner of the sea." I hugged him so hard my hands trembled. In his innocence, that boy had told the purest truth. I was the owner of the sea, not because I possessed it, but because I learned to navigate it. That night, while the moon rose over the horizon, I sat alone on the porch with a cup of tea. The air was warm, and the sound of the waves arrived like a heart beating slowly. I looked at the sky and spoke in a low voice as if Julian could hear me. "You know, old man, I think I made it. Not only did I recover the house, I recovered something more important, myself." The wind blew gently, and a leaf fell on my lap. It was from the lemon tree he had planted. I took it between my fingers and smiled. The sea seemed to shine more than ever. This house started breathing again. Julian, and every corner has your name. But the most beautiful thing is that by opening the windows, I also started breathing again. Before sleeping, I left the doors open so the sea air would travel through the hallways. The moon entered through the windows, illuminating the photographs, the books, the memories. Everything seemed different. It was not the house that had changed. It was me. I rested my head on the pillow and thought of all the stages of my life. The young woman in love, the resilient widow, the patient mother, the humiliated woman, the silent strategist, the survivor, and now the teacher. All lived inside me, and together they formed the most solid house I had ever built. I closed my eyes, and before falling asleep, I whispered a last prayer. May no woman have to be expelled from her own home to remember that it was always hers. The sea responded with a murmur, as if approving my words, and while the sunrise stained the sky with gold again, I knew that Carmen Vance's house was not just a structure facing the sea. It was the symbol of all the women who were once called old, a nuisance, or a bother, and who, without making noise, learned to build empires with the remains of their dignity. Because when a woman decides to stand up, the whole house and the world with her breathes again. They say time heals everything. I do not believe it. Time does not heal. It teaches. And when one learns, pain stops hurting to become a lesson. That was what happened to me. For many years, I thought that love meant enduring, silencing, bearing, that being a mother was staying still, even if the soul screamed that patience was a virtue, even when it became a chain. Today, I know it is not. Love without respect is a jail, and silence, when it is imposed, leaves scars deeper than any hurtful word. I forgave Danielle not because she deserved it, but because I needed to release the weight of her offense. I forgave my son because a mother's love does not give up. It only transforms. And I forgave myself for having taken so long to stand up. Because no one teaches us to defend ourselves without shouting to leave, without fleeing to recover, without taking revenge. But a day arrives, that inevitable day, when a woman looks in the mirror and understands that she no longer needs permission to exist. Today, when I open the windows of my house and let the sea enter, I feel that I also let life enter. It no longer hurts to remember. I no longer fear being alone, because I learned that solitude is not absence. It is space, a sacred space, where one can find oneself again, rebuild oneself, reconcile with everything one was. And if any woman hearing my story is going through something similar, I want her to hear me well. You are not invisible, you are not replaceable, and you are not alone. Your value does not depend on who recognizes you, but on who you are when no one is watching. So get up, pick up your pieces, your memories, your broken dreams, and start over. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to return to being you. Respect is not begged for, it is sustained, and dignity, when lost, can always be recovered, even if it is with tears. I did it, and if I could, you can too. Tell me in the comments which city you are watching us from. I would love to know how far these words reach. Like if this story touched your heart, and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying me in more stories like this one. Stories of life, of strength, of women who, like you and like me, learned to get up when everything seemed finished. Because in the end, we are all houses facing the sea, sometimes hit by the waves, sometimes empty, but always willing to breathe again.